All right, I should look at all right, we'll start and we'll give a few more minutes for people to come in.
I think we're good to go.
Yeah, I think we're good. All right. Good evening. Welcome to the first webinar in Maine AYC's fall webinar series. Tonight we're just excited to be talking about an important topic in our world currently, which is voting. We're going to start this evening with some brief introductions. From Maine AYC tonight, we have our Executive Director, Tara Williams, who will be keeping an eye on the chat box and also posting this to Facebook. So if you have any questions and want to engage with our panelists, please just put them in our chat box. My name is Morgan Tolan. I am the Outreach Specialist and Teach Scholarship Counselor at Maine AYC. From the League of Women Voters, we have Executive Director Anna Keller. Anna grew up in Maine before earning a bachelor's degree in political science from Yale University and a master's in conflict studies from the London School of Economics. Their experience with democracy and anti-corruption campaigns in Eastern Europe and Central Asia makes them all the more committed to preserving and strengthening civil society and grassroots democracy in Maine. Anna started working at Maine Citizens for Clean Elections in 2014 as an organizer on the Clean Elections Initiative. They ran for the state legislature as a clean elections candidate in 2016. Anna was appointed as the first joint executive director at MCCE and the League of Women Voters of Maine. Joining Anna from the League of Women Voters is Gina Coppins. Gina is the co-founder of the Capital Area chapter of the League of Women Voters. The Capital chapter is a recent addition to the League's growing list of chapters around the state of Maine. The Capital Area League has been working on registering high school students to vote, which is really awesome, planning candidate forums, and distributing voter guides. She also serves on the League's Advocacy Committee and the National Popular Vote Committee. She lives in Belgrade and will be a poll worker in her town this election. Thank you, Anna and Regina, for joining us. Tonight, we're looking forward to collaborating with Anna and Regina to prepare families, parents of young children, and early childhood professionals with how to vote, how to support parents and educators, ability to vote, and how to engage with candidates around early childhood issues. I'll go to my next slide, if it lets me. So first up on our agenda tonight, we want to talk about how to vote in 2020. Anna and Regina, we would love to hear your guidance and advice about voting in 2020 and how it's a little different this year than in past elections, including discussing absentee ballots, mailing in votes, and early voting.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks.
Well, thanks so much for having us. It's really exciting to be collaborating around this. And this fall and really this whole year, as we've been preparing for the November election, we've been seeing both, I would say, unprecedented anxiety about this election and also real determination for people to make sure that they are going to be able to vote, that everyone is going to be able to vote, and that we can really work together around it. So it's been fun getting to do lots of collaborations and figure out how we can make talking about voting and civic engagement generally part of the conversation in lots of ways in our lives. As Morgan was saying, we are dealing with some new things and some of the same things, talking about our elections this fall. Maine, we're really lucky. We have some of the strongest voting laws in the country, and we tend to have high voter participation because of it. But all of that, really the rubber meets the road when it comes to figuring out how is it going to work for you in your town and your particular circumstance. So the first thing with voting, registering to vote, We have very high voter registration rates in Maine, and we are very lucky that we have same-day voter registration. And so the first thing to keep in mind with registering to vote is that we, unlike a lot of states, we don't have cutoffs of when you have to be registered by. You always have the option of showing up at your polling place on election day and registering and voting then. That said, everything was going to work a lot better in this election. And I'm going to say this a bunch. The earlier we get things done, the earlier that you get registered, figure out what your situation needs to be, make your plan to vote, the better things are going to go. And so definitely encouraging anyone who knows that they need to register to vote. If you've moved, if you had a name change, all of those things are reasons why you might need to update your registration, to do that ahead of election day. And part of that is, and we'll get there, is that we're encouraging everyone to vote absentee or early as much as possible. So if you need to register to vote, you've got a couple of options. You can go in person to your town office and register. Just about every place is open, at least some places only by appointment, but most town halls have hours to go in and register. You can also do it by mail. You can send in voter registration card. There are forms that you can print off, or if you don't have a printer, the town can mail you a card and you can mail it back. You have to send in with that proof of your residency and proof of your identification. There's a bunch of different ways you can do that. You don't have to have a photo ID. There is a list on the league website or the Secretary of State of all of the different kinds of documentation you can use to show your residency and your ID. But those are the two main ways, either going in person or doing it by mail. We wish we had online voter registration in Maine, but sadly not yet. And there is a cutoff for registering by mail. And this is the same cutoff that would be in place if you were registering someone with what we call a third-party voter registration drive. And that's what the league does a lot of. It's what Gina's been doing some this year and always in the past with our local leagues, where you go into a school and do a voter registration drive. We're doing less of those this year, but the cutoff for mailing in a card, it has to get to the town by October 19th. So if for anyone who is, really quarantining, really not doing anything in person, that deadline is important to know that you have to be registered by October 15th. You can request an absentee ballot and register at the same time. If you're doing it in person, it's easy to go register and vote right then. Or if you're doing it by mail, you can send in both forms at the same time. So it can save some time there. Gina, am I missing anything on voter registration? Do you want to add anything there?
No, I don't think so. I think this year is unusual in that so many people are going to be voting absentee ballot. Normally, you could show your identification when you do go and vote if you have registered for the first time. But if you're asking for an absentee ballot, yeah, you will have to send in some proof of residency and identification with it.
Yeah. So once you're registered, or as you're registering, we are encouraging people who can to vote by absentee ballot this year. That can either be voting by mail or doing in-person absentee, where you go into your town office, you request your ballot, fill it out, and return it right there in the office. Both are really good methods. And we know that not everyone is able to vote ahead of time and do vote by mail. Some people are still going to show up on election day. It's really important we still have, voting in person at the polls. But for people who can plan ahead, we're encouraging everyone to do that for two reasons. One, because it helps to have your own If you need to register, if you need to plan ahead, if there's anything that goes wrong, you've got plenty of time. Don't wait till the last minute. And also because we're making it safer for people who do need to go vote in person, for our poll workers, to make sure that we don't have long lines or any issues at the polling places. So to request an absentee ballot, you can do it online. There is an easy form. You can do it by mail. You can call your clerk, and you can go in and request it in person. Requests are being taken for no excuse absentee voting. So you don't have to have any reason for this. You can, anyone can request it. Those are being taken online, by mail, and by phone up to the Thursday before the election. And then you can go in and vote in person, and do an in-person request up until the Friday before the election. After that, if you need an absentee ballot, you can still get one, but you just have to have a reason, like being sick, knowing that you're going to be out of town that day, those kind of things. But if you are before then, you're all good. One of the things that's come up a lot recently for people is concerns around absentee voting. And I'm not talking about as much about the worries about fraud or that somehow mail-in voting is going to be causing all of these problems. But I think a lot of people are balancing worries about the post office or worries about making sure their ballot really is going to get to the clerk and get counted if they vote by mail. So I do want to just address those particular concerns. So we've talked to a lot of people in the post office. We've talked to a lot of town clerks who've been talking to their local postmasters. And what we've been hearing across the board is that people should feel comfortable trusting the Postal Service. And as long as they're not waiting until the last minute, you should feel totally comfortable at this point still requesting an absentee ballot by mail, having it mailed to you and putting it back in the post, in the mail, and sending it back off to your town. But that's not your only option. You can pick one up in person. You can go in and vote it in person and give it right back, or you could take it home and return it later. And you also have the option in lots of towns of having a drop box. And so we're seeing probably something like 300-ish out of Maine's 500 towns have a secure drop box where if you get your absentee ballot in the mail, you vote it, and you want to put it back in, and you want to return it in person, you can drop it off in a drop box, and you know that it's gotten back. One thing we're really excited about is that the Secretary of State now has an absentee ballot lookup service. And I think I saw that going into the chat, but you now can put in your name, birthday, and town and look up where your absentee ballot is in the process. Has your request been accepted? Has it been mailed? And then once you return it, has it gotten back? Has it been accepted? Or if it had been rejected, you would know and be able to request another ballot or fix what was wrong with it. Ballots rarely get rejected. If the most common reason that they do is because people forget to sign the back of the envelope. So that's the super boring PSA from us is please sign the back of the envelope, because you don't want to have your ballot rejected and have to do it again because of that. And ballots have to be returned by 8 p.m. on election day. So as we're getting into that last week before, we're encouraging people, rather than putting it in the mail, return it either in a Dropbox or go in and return it directly to your clerk. That's just the safer way of doing things, but why wait? Vote it now. Go into your town office tomorrow if they're open and vote then. And that's basically what we're trying to encourage people is early, request early, vote early, return it early. And the more people take care of things and get it done, the easier it's going to be for the inevitable people who have to fix something at the last minute. We also, ballots can start being processed early in Maine, which means that even though there's going to be a flood of absentee ballots, towns are able to start taking them out of the envelope, running them through the scanners. They don't do any of the tallying to know like how many votes any candidate has gotten, but they start doing that processing up to 7 days before the election. And that'll also mean that we will not have to wait a huge amount of time on election day to know, unlike some other places. That was all super in the weeds, but what I've been hearing is that more than ever, people are focused on all of these details. So I wanted to give that that overview of what all of these rules and processes are, and I'm really happy to answer any questions. And also, like I said, Gina, please add in anything that I am missing here.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. A lot of towns are going to be open a few extra evenings this next month for people to go in and vote. For example, where I live in Belgrade, the 2 Thursdays before the election, they're going to be open until 7:30 just for absentee voting. And in Augusta, the next 2 weeks, they have 3 evenings each week where they're going to be open until 6:30 for voter registration and absentee voting. So you can check your town's website to see if they're having some extra hours or call them. I think it's going to be pretty common.
Yeah, that's great information for our early childhood educators who might work super long hours and need those evening hours. Tara, were there any questions in the chat box?
Just checking that out. None yet. I'll keep looking at it as we go through. I put in some of the links. So if any of you if you're on your computers, you're welcome to grab the links there. Anyone who's wanting those links also know that we will follow up with them later.
Yes. Yeah.
But otherwise, I think we can move on to the next one and I'll let you know.
Great. All right. So our next topic is about how helping our communities vote, and specifically strategies for early childhood programs and families and parents with young children. And Gina just commented on this a little bit about evening hours, which is really important for early childhood professionals, but also how ways to support early childhood educators and families, ways to get out and vote. Lots of early childhood professionals work Monday through Friday, possibly 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. So how can we support each other in the importance of voting?
Yeah, the later hours is a really great thing. And it also just encourage people that, part of your role as a citizen can also be as an advocate with your own town, that we're still seeing clerks being very responsive to the needs of their community. And so that if they hear that people really, would love to have an option to go in the evening, or even I talked to the clerk in Wyndham last week where they're doing a Saturday. And so there are those options, and sometimes all it takes is, someone saying, I need it, or I know someone who really could use this to help make that happen, because so much of our voting is local, and these decisions get made, town by town by the local officials. So strategies for encouraging voting. When social scientists study methods of getting out the vote and what actually works, all of the door knocking and phone calling and mailers and all of the things that people do, the top 2 things that kind of come out of all of that, and they can apply just as much in our personal lives as they do in big thousands of people strategies, are personal connection and making a plan. And the personal connection piece, you see campaigns and candidates try to do this in all kinds of ways that seem kind of hokey, because what they're trying to get at is what you already have with the parents that you work with your friends, is a existing relationship. And so people are much more likely to be motivated by a friend, an acquaintance, a coworker, telling them about the importance of voting than they are by a stranger telling them that. So because you're networked in with lots of people who may or may not be, thinking a lot about voting, you really have this opportunity to connect with them. And it doesn't have to be anything elaborate, just where they know that you're thinking about the election, you're wondering about, if they know everything they need, you talk about your own, intention of when you're going to go vote. All of those things help to create this culture and this sense of expectation that, like, okay, yeah, everybody around me is voting. It must be the normal thing to do. It must be the thing that everyone's doing. People like me are doing it. All of those sort of subtle social cues go into helping to get people motivated and in the top of their minds. Also, making a plan. And this is where all of the information that I was just talking about really is all just pieces of information to help you make a plan. And so we don't want to make voting sound complicated, because at the end of the day, like, most of this is pretty simple and people manage it just fine. But having that information in place to know that you want to think through, okay, so if I'm going to go vote in person on election day, when am I going to do it? How am I going to get there? Where is my polling place? Am I going to bring my kids with me? But what if there's a long line? Like, thinking about these things ahead of time makes it much, much more likely that someone is actually going to follow through. And what we're encouraging people this year is to think through your plan and then also kind of think about your backup plan. It's good to know, how you would request an absentee ballot if you needed one, or if a family member needed one. It's good to know where your polling place is in case you did, realize, oh, wait, I got to go down on election day, or I've got to help my neighbor go vote on election day. So we're encouraging everyone to, to think ahead for themselves, and also to kind of think, okay, but what's my contingency plan? And that's where all of the voting early, planning early makes it possible to have contingency plans. So all of this stuff, you can make it super sophisticated, but really the basics around saying, oh, hey, I was excited because I got my absentee ballot the other day, and I was going to make sure that I turned right around and stuck it back in the mail because I want to make sure that it gets in there ahead of time. Do you think you're going to vote early, or you're going to go into the polls this year? Like, that's not necessarily a hard conversation to have. Sometimes it's a little tough to bring up voting because we think it's political. We think it's hard to talk to people about this stuff, but those sort of ways where you personalize it and you normalize it, make it part of what's okay to talk about in in a workplace, in a childcare setting, any of these environments. I am gonna pause there, and I know that you folks have been doing some really great thinking about how to connect around the particular ways that childcare providers and educators are able to connect here.
Sure. I was going to mention, Morgan, that we had a couple of ideas shared in the chat. One is from a parent who believe their child went to a YMCA program where last year they offered extended hours so that parents could have more time to vote after normal childcare hours. And then from an early educator who works at a childcare center, who their director worked on flexibility with staffing last year for in-person voting, making sure that people had longer breaks or could come in later or leave earlier to make sure that they had time to vote. If anyone else who's on tonight wants to throw things into the chat box of the Q&A that you've done in the past, or you would like to have your childcare program or colleagues do to support you in your ability to vote, this is a great place for us to share ideas about what we can do. And then I'm curious if anyone, if you are typing in those ideas, if your employer or if you are a director have done anything in particular this year to share about how to vote, how to register to vote. If not, we're giving you those resources now. So I'll keep an eye on that and see if any others come in.
Great, thanks. Yeah, those are some great suggestions. And I can compile those into the resource we send out afterwards too.
I just want to make a comment. I know that Maine Equal Justice has passed out voter registration cards and absentee ballot requests to, I think, 2,000 of families that whose children go to Head Start. So I don't know if that's something that the Head Start teachers might want to follow up with some of their parents to see if they need any help completing them or if they have any questions, because those are all out there.
Those are registration forms, you said?
Yeah, voter registration cards and also requests for absentee ballots.
That's wonderful. Great.
Yeah. Oh, I see somebody actually put that right into the chat. That's really great.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, we've got a few things coming in now. One of our participants helped hand out those forms for families, registration cards, absentee ballots, also pens and hand sanitizer. And then another person is sharing that her town has hours for bringing in their ballots. She can't make it at that time and is wondering if a friend can drop off her ballot, or does she have to be the one to drop it off?
So you have to have it either dropped off by you or an immediate family member. There are ways to have another like third-party person do it. It is a little, you have to fill out a form when you request the ballot. It's a little complicated. Happy to talk that situation through with anyone who's in that, which is also probably a good time to mention the some of the voter assistance resources that we've got with the League and with our coalition partners, including Maine Equal Justice. We had what's up on the screen, the Help Maine Vote Facebook group where people can post questions or any situations they see. We also just this week are starting a new voter hotline, which people can call in, text, or send us an email, and we have people who are ready to answer questions. So that's also something where both someone has a question or wants to talk through a particular situation, and particularly if they're not able to get through to their clerk or not getting a great satisfactory answer, that is those are resources. We always try to point people to their town clerks as the best local resources, but the clerks are super slammed right now. Sometimes it's hard to get through, and they are also asking us that if could we encourage people who are just worried about whether or not their ballot has arrived yet, they could call the League and we could help them look that up. And then if it's serious, if there's something town specific, to call their clerk. Also, not every clerk is equally well informed, and occasionally we see them give out wrong information. So it's just worth knowing if something feels wrong, if you're like, I don't think that is the right answer, go with your gut, get a second opinion, and find another source, just because we do run into, occasional, not malicious, just sometimes, wrong information, people are poorly trained or just don't communicate it well. So it's worth knowing that as well.
Great.
Anna, before we move on, there is another question here for you or Regina. or Morgan, maybe as a former director as well. One person's mentioning that sometimes voting in politics can induce strong feelings when you have early childhood professionals working with families and colleagues. Any tips on your messaging and ways you can promote voting methods in families and to make sure that's presented in a nonpartisan way?
Go ahead, Anna.
It's like, I will be real that it is getting harder and harder to talk about things that used to be super nonpartisan, totally uncontroversial, everyone could agree on, are getting more and more polarized. That said, I think there is a sort of core values, as Americans, we believe in our democracy. We believe that everyone, should get out and vote. That all of those things are, can be expressed as commonly held values, and that no matter who you're going to vote for, no matter what positions you hold, we just want to make sure that you're participating, and then no one gets turned away. And I think that those messages will resonate with most people, where we've found it helpful. And this is another resource that we've got coming, is with the League voter guide that we produce. We also have been just creating some posters. These are sort of like a print thing that people can print out and stick up. This just, election day is, here, you can also request an absentee ballot. If you've got questions, go to this website. And just like having that poster up on the wall, that is, there's nothing controversial there. That's just providing you some basic facts. It can also be like a conversation starter and a thing to refer to. And it gives you this sense of like, okay, well, we're talking about official information here. And so sometimes, like, I was saying how personalizing everything helps. Sometimes you want to depersonalize it and make it seem just, this is, super, boring, black and white, official information, nothing, nothing rah-rah campaigny about this. So being able to pull on that, the words of the local elections administrators, putting up things, directly from the Secretary of State, all of that stuff is also, really can help to lower tensions. But what we're also finding is that sometimes even in the worst of the worst of the politics, that if you go at it with a smile and making it be sure that like, hi, I as a human being care that you as a human being are heard. Most people are pretty receptive to that. When we go canvass and knock on doors and talk to voters, we're kind of always, I'm just surprised at how receptive people are to really that kind of nonpartisan outreach and people, connecting as human beings. And it can kind of reaffirm people's faith in those democratic values that have been, small d democratic values that have been eroded over the last few years. So I won't say it's always easy, but also it can be really worthwhile. And sometimes people are really grateful to be able to engage in a way that isn't screaming and the debates and all of the rest of it, and are kind of like, oh, good, I can actually talk about this because I had a question, but I couldn't figure out who to talk to about it because it seemed like everyone has an agenda.
That's some great advice. And I think for me, as someone who was a former director, it's important, like you mentioned, there's so many resources you can post in your center or your program that come from someone else. So it's not labeled as yours, and you can say, hey, here's just some information to share. It's not my opinion, it's just, here's some information.
I'd like to just add something about the voter guides. And Anna, you can tell me if this isn't possible, but we are printing 100,000 of them, last I heard. And if anybody on the call would like some of them for their centers, we could get them some, because we're going to have, statewide distribution of them in the next week or so.
Yeah, they're heading to the printer at the end of this week, so we should have them out soon. And those include all of the voting rights information, just how to vote and that stuff, as well as some very basic sort of candidate information for all of the federal offices are in our printed guides. We've done this every year for about the last 12 years, so people know them pretty well. And we also have our website, vote411.org, that has information about state legislature, county level, all the way down to municipal in a lot of cases. And so that's another reason people sometimes say they don't vote. They get turned off about what's going on at the federal level, and then they don't feel like they have enough information about what's going on at the local level. So we're trying to make sure that as much as possible, people have the ability to look at, okay, so what does my select board actually do, and how would I know whether I should vote for this person or this person? Well, okay, here we've got some information about that. So we won't have perfect coverage of the whole state, but we're trying to get as many communities into that as possible. We're still adding them over the course of this month to try to get as much of that local information there as possible.
Right, that kind of segues perfectly into our next topic of candidate forums on local levels, and how our attendees of this webinar can get involved with that, with the candidates in their local communities and ways to engage with them. And I know Gina said she had a bunch of information that would be helpful on this topic.
Yeah, the local leagues around the state have been sponsoring some candidate forums, and the League of Women Voters Maine website has a list of those candidate forums, and I can post that in the chat. And they're all on Zoom, so it's very easy for people, even if they're not, even frankly, even if they're not your candidates in your community. I mean, anybody can tune in, but it's also a good way to post your questions to the candidates. And I think we are going to be posting them on the league's Facebook page after the forum, so people can still go back and look at them, share them. So that's a really good way to get to know the candidates. I think it's actually more effective than having in-person ones, because we get a bigger attendance. And the other thing that I'll put on the chat is a way to find out who your state rep is and your state senator is, and also who is running for those offices, and with their email and phone numbers, so that you can call them with your questions and talk with them and let them know what is important to you.
That's great. So do you, with those, I know maybe we don't all have as much experience in that, do you find if you emailed or called with questions, important topics, how responsive are local candidates to those types of reach outs?
Well, I would say it varies. Once the election's over, I think a lot of the elected officials will say that, no one calls me I get very few calls, and they like to get calls. And we think that, calling them once they're elected is very effective. And I don't know, maybe if you can speak to how responsive they are during the election cycle, if they call people back, if they answer emails, are they listening to their constituents?
Well, they should be. I mean, their constituents are their voters. And so, I mean, it all depends. Some, just like any human beings, some candidates are more, better responsive and, easier to get in touch with than others are. Some of them are also working and parents and doing all of the things. But if you don't hear back from someone, I would, that might influence my vote if I felt like they were somebody who, wasn't, even if they didn't agree with me, wasn't at least, willing to say, thanks for sharing how you feel. So I think reaching out to people while they're running is great. It plants in their mind before they get into office the seed of, what people care about. And you can start up a relationship with them in a way that when you then, if there's something coming up that they're going to vote on that you really care about, it'll be easier to reach out to them the next time. We also hear some people love email, some people love, are going to be more responsive by phone. Some people, you message them on Facebook. That's the best way. Apparently that's the best way to get in touch with the governor, by the way. Every once in a while she still responds to, messages on her personal Facebook. It's Maine, so I talked to one legislator recently who was like, I wish people would just email me because I can respond to emails while I'm sitting in a particularly boring hearing. I can respond to emails while, at 2 a.m. when I can't go to sleep. I can't call people back during any of those things. That's nice. And also it's nice for me to be able to remember who emailed me, and I can use that as an example of a constituent who cares about an issue. Other people, like, definitely, they're gonna be like, email, that was too, that was easy. That's not as meaningful as somebody who called me. It's gonna vary based on your legislator. As a millennial who hates talking to people on the phone, I was thrilled to have a legislator be like, please just email me. But this stuff varies generationally and personality wise and all of this. But they're just humans. Our state representatives only represent about 5,000 voters each. So, we can't be too scared of them. And if they act like we should be, that's a bad sign.
We had a question coming in about how to find candidates. And so I wanted to ask you, do you find the best way is to reach out to your town clerk's office if you want to know who your candidates are? Look for a sample ballot. Any other tips?
This has been something I've looked at a lot recently because I've been trying to help get our municipal information into our voter guide. So I will say, first check out vote411.org. You can put in your address and it'll show you candidates on your ballot. And we're trying to have as much as possible of that complete. What we're finding is that how accessible this information is by your town varies, and varies a lot. So for example, I live in Portland. Portland posts, okay, all of the candidates who are running for local office and their contact information is like right up there in public. Other towns don't even have sample ballots yet. I have been having to call towns to find out, do you have a municipal election going on this year? So varies widely. Gina put in the chat here the Maine campaign finance database, which is a thing that a lot of people don't know about, but it's useful not only for finding out how your candidates for state legislature are funded, but also it includes, and they have to put in a phone number and an email when they register with the Ethics Commission to do their campaign spending reports. So you can look them up there, and not only will you see, what they are spending their campaign money on, which can be interesting. It also has good contact information for all of the candidates for the state legislature and for county level offices. So that's another resource that can be useful. But once you get down to that municipal level, I wish it was more comprehensive, and that's the gap that we're trying to fill, because it all varies widely. And I will plug that the League is having a webinar tomorrow at noon, if anyone is interested, where we are going to talk with a former state rep, Peggy Rotundo from Lewiston, the Kennebec County administrator, and a young new school board member from South Thomaston about state, county, and local offices and what is actually decided at those levels, and some of the information about those down ballot races. And I'm really excited about it because I still don't really understand how county government works. And so I'm hoping to learn some things from that tomorrow.
That's great. Thanks. Any other questions in there, Tara? Should I move on?
I think we're ready to keep going.
Good. Cool. So our next slide is about asking about childcare in local candidate forums, and how important it is. in a time it can feel overwhelming to think of the right words and the right questions. These are 3 questions that Maine AYC has come up with to ask and engage in conversations with candidates. But we'd also love to hear from Gina and Anna on their ideas, and put you on the spot probably, but thinking about how can we engage our local candidates about these early childhood issues in an election. I'm not going to go through and read these because I'll share these slides with all our attendees. But if you feel like you want to add anything, or even attendees have a good question for candidates that they want to share with everyone, that would be wonderful.
Yes, it would be great to see if you have a question that you've already asked a candidate or you're planning to ask. And then Morgan, I'll just throw in a plug, because part of our work as a nonprofit is also that we really want to help parents and early childhood professionals engage both during this time of year, when we would call this electoral advocacy and getting out the vote, but also with our elected officials once they're in office. So when we're saying ask about childcare, we hope you're going to ask about childcare now, but keep asking these questions in the coming months and year as we work really hard to make positive changes in Maine.
I just also like to add that, asking these questions is a way of also informing the candidates about these issues, because a lot of candidates, are not, especially if they're just running for the first time, they're not up on these issues. So it's a really great way to inform them and let them ask you questions too.
Yeah,
that's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah, they are, maybe they're experts in 1 or 2 things, but even the people who've been around for a while, they're not going to be experts in everything. And, they're either going to be turned to you as a source, or they're going to turn to a lobbyist as a source, or they're going to, vote the way the person sitting next to them tells them to vote. So, you might as well be their informed constituent who's giving them information.
Agreed. That's something, Anna, that I think we forget a lot of times. When I formerly, before this job, worked in the classroom in both childcare and schools, and didn't think about how much I could be that expert for my legislators, that as their constituent, I could give them information that they might not have. And now in this role, doing a lot more state level policy and advocacy work, I'm finding how much our legislators need to hear from their constituents in all different issue areas. We focus on this one, right? But there's so many different issue areas. So, we're really hoping those of you engaging with us and watching this tonight will be that expert, and use outreach now as just one opportunity to start to build a relationship or continue your relationship with your elected officials. So because they will email you, they'll call you even when it comes time to a vote, and they realize, oh, right, I met this person. She teaches at that childcare program down the road, or, oh, right, she's the owner of that family childcare. She knows all about this. I'll reach out to her. And you are the experts. We want them asking you.
That's such a great point. And one thing that's been coming up kind of across the board, particularly with state level legislators, but really, I mean, it's every level, it's federal down to towns, is that as we're thinking about the budgets that are going to get written in the next year, and the real financial crunch that they're going to be up against, asking them, like, when you're making these decisions, who are you going to talk to? Like, not in a pushy way, but just to be like, okay, so someone's going to tell you, well, we have to cut, we can't cut the budget for education, for higher ed, so we're going to take it from this, or how are we going to pit nursing homes against early childhood? Like, when they're going to be facing these what are going to feel like impossible choices about how to spend money, and letting them know that, okay, so you're going to have this come up. When that happens, how are you going to deal with that? Who are you going to talk to? How are you going to process what's going to feel like really painful and difficult? And because it's easy for them to say, well, of course I care about your issue. This is super important. I felt like they have to say, oh yes, I'm going to prioritize early childhood over everything else. But just I personally find that how candidates talk about how they're going to make really hard choices and who they're going to reach out to in that moment tells me so much about what kind of a legislator they're going to be and what kind of a, just in general, what kind of a representative they're going to be.
Great. Well, thank you. So our next piece, and I'm just going to move this over, is our call to action and what to do next from here. And we just want to thank you, Anna and Gina, for joining us and empowering us with this important information. But make sure we're looking towards the future of we've learned all of this and what can we do now. So one, like we talked about so much through this, is to make a plan to vote. And as Anna pointed out earlier, then make a backup plan and get out and vote, and supporting others in voting and share your important information. Just casual conversations, or here's how I'm going to vote. How are you going to vote? And then asking candidates about early childhood education and supporting our families. And just maybe answer your phone and take a risk, and maybe it won't be someone about your car warranty. We've learned this. If there's anything left in the chat box or anything Anna or Gina or Tara want to add before we wrap up?
No questions? Go ahead, Anna.
Oh, I was just going to say that, and I'll make this plug sort of on behalf of Gina and all of our other local chapter folks, is that we are, the league is in our 100th anniversary year this year, and we're seeing a lot of new members join, and it's really exciting. And so I will just put out, not among all of the many, many great things that you all are doing in the world, we'd love you to become league members and engaged in your community that way as well. And we're fun. We make very boring voting things be as much fun as we possibly can. But if this kind of stuff is something that you're particularly interested in, we're always happy to have new folks.
And I'd just like to add that we have a pay what you can policy too for members. So if you can't,
that's great.
Yeah, because
that's
and one of the
wonderful.
bennies is you get a lot of information about the advocacy work that the league is doing in the legislature.
And we definitely see that as supporting all of the advocacy work that you're doing and that other issue advocates are doing, because we're all about the process, so that you can advocate for the issues that you need.
Great, thank you. So to attendees of the webinar, we'll send out in the next few days some resources that we've gathered through this, so that you don't have to try to be furiously writing those down. Were there any leftover questions, Tara?
No, just a couple of thank yous. So I'll just echo that. Thank you so much to Anna and
yes,
our participants are in appreciation, and we have some folks engaging with us on Facebook as well that are commenting and sharing their own information. So this has been great.
Great.
Well, thank you.
Joining. And have a wonderful evening.
Great. Thank you
so much.